Welcome to another edition of Bards in the Basement. Today we will be reading Sonnet 29 by William Shakespeare. I chose this sonnet because it's one of my favorite sonnets by Shakespeare. It's also a nice sonnet to show how the sonnet form works and how Shakespeare sometimes breaks the rules of the sonnet form himself. And furthermore, if you Google Sonnet 29 Rufus Wainwright or YouTube it, you'll find a nice musical version of Sonnet 29 that Rufus Wainwright did for the anniversary of Shakespeare's birth. All right. Shakespeare was born in 1564, died in 1616. He is considered to be the greatest playwright in the English language. He also wrote the collection of poetry and 154 sonnets. There's a whole study of the sonnet cycle, but I'm not really going to go into that. I'm just going to look at this one sonnet here today. If you want to know more about the sonnet cycle, there's plenty of resources out there. I would suggest Will in the World, an outstanding book on Shakespeare that does a new historical reading of Shakespeare's works and lives. But let us now just go to the poem itself. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see Sonnet 29 by Shakespeare. On the right-hand side of the screen, you see the literary terms that I will mention as I go through the sonnet. These are the typical terms when discussing sonnets that you'll come across in your English class or studies of sonnets. First thing I just want to note is that there's a book a few years ago that said if it looks like a box, it's a sonnet. That was how to read like a literary professor, a literature professor. So that was kind of like a fast and easy rule. If it looks like a box, it's probably a sonnet. Now I'm going to read the sonnet, then I'm going to manipulate the appearance of the sonnet on the page as I talk about some of the literary terms. So let's hear the sonnet first. Sonnet 29. When, in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring that man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet, in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. This is a wonderful love poem. What I like about this love poem is that it actually is about the object of affection and how that object or that person of desire changes the speaker's outlook. The most famous sonnet by Shakespeare is Sonnet 18, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day, which is a lovely sonnet. Cannot say anything bad about it. But in the end, it's kind of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Shakespeare saying like, people will remember you because I wrote this sonnet about you. It's more about the writing of the sonnet than the person that Shakespeare is addressing. So on the left-hand side, we see the definitions of some of the literary terms. Sonnet, a 14-line poem using a number of formal rhyme schemes. In English, typically 10 syllables per line. And you notice the rhyme scheme. We have the A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's your typical rhyme scheme. Now you will see some variations with the Italian rhyme scheme, or when I take you through a contemporary sonnet, you'll see how contemporary sonneteer plays with rhyme scheme, also plays with the typical 10 syllable per line, and does so for artistic, thematic reasons. All right, so there's the kind of like the overall definition. Now the next literary term is the quatrain, and so I just want to just quickly note what the quatrain, how that looks on the poem itself, or just show you that what the quatrain looks like. I'm going to now separate the poem into 3 quatrains and the couplet. Typically, it's published as without the space between each of the quatrains. But you'll see I now have three quatrains and a couplet. A quatrain is a 4-line stanza of poetry with alternating rhyme scheme. So we have quatrain number 1, when in disgrace. Quatrain number 2 starts wishing like one more rich in hope. Quatrain number 3 starts with yet in these. And then we have the couplet, for thy sweet. Now, each quatrain is used for a particular purpose. Typically, quatrain number 1 introduces an idea. When in disgrace with fortune. Quatrain number 2 may develop that idea, may give use a different metaphor, may offer different insight to the first quatrain. Then quatrain number 3 sometimes can be seen as the shift. Something happens in quatrain number 3 where the speaker of the poem realizes something. It is not uncommon in Shakespeare's sonnets to go to the 9th line and look at the first word. Here we have yet. Sometimes Shakespeare have yet or so or but and. He likes conjunctions at the start of the third quatrain to signal a shift. And then I like to think of the couplet as the truth of the poem, the main idea of the poem. And so we, in conclusion, this is the writer's conclusion in the couplet. So that's kind of like the breakdown. 3 quatrains and a couplet with an alternating rhyme scheme. This is the standard English/Shakespearean sonnet. So those are some of the ideas there. I'll talk more about iambic pentameter and the trochee towards the end of the conversation. Now I want to go to just walking through what Shakespeare is doing in this sonnet. So let's go to the first stanza. When in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes, I alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate. Now notice that fortune is capitalized. Some editions don't capitalize fortune, which I think is a mistake, because fortune should be seen as the god. The wheel of fortune. You spin the wheel and maybe you solve the puzzle or something like that. But the pagan idea that fortune was this wheel in the sky. Wheel in the sky keeps on turning. So this idea of the wheel of fortune. And so now the wheel of fortune has turned, and the speaker feels as though fortune is looking upon him as disgrace. And also the speaker feels like fortune's looking down on me. Men's eyes are looking down on me. I'm seen as a disgrace in their eyes, if you will. And so this first stanza is almost like a pity party, if you will. I alone, I'm an outcast. And so I'm all alone, and the men and human and fortune are looking down upon me. And trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries. I love that phrase, deaf heaven. Is it because the heaven is, there is no God, or is it because heaven doesn't want to be troubled by your self pity? Or couple that with the bootless cries, my faithless cries. So heaven doesn't listen to you because you lack faith. I also think I like the phrase bootless too, or the word bootless too, because the idea that think about you have no foundation. Your cries are without foundation, because you know what, fortune isn't looking down on you. That men, humankind, aren't looking down on you. So we have a nice kind of like ambiguity there. We love our ambiguity because it allows us to have multiple readings, if you will. But those multiple readings have to be connected to the poem. So when the speaker of the poem feels this way, they look upon themselves and they curse their fate. Ah! Curses! I'm out of fortune, and heaven is not listening to me. So that's quatrain number 1. Quatrain number 2, now we have the speaker doing a compare and contrast, if you will, with the speaker and others. Wishing me like one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring that man's art and that man's scope. with what I most enjoy contented least. Oh my goodness. Now the speaker is saying, I wish I was more hopeful like that person over there. Or featured, I wish I had that person's good looks. What? I think that losing your hair on top, slightly balding, is quite attractive. But the speaker here is feeling that they may not be that good looking. And then the next one, featured like him, like him with friends possessed. I wish I had more friends. Once again, we have this pity party going on, or this sadness. I don't want to reduce it, because the speaker truly is depressed, truly is sad, and they're lacking hope. They see themselves as unattractive. They see themselves as without friends. Once again, that outcast, without friends, possessed, reminds us of in the first quatrain, outcast. The next line, desiring that man's art. Which on one hand, it makes us kind of chuckle, because there were so many different writers and playwrights, poets from the Elizabethan time, but we remember Shakespeare for his art. And so here we have the speaker here saying, I wish I had that person's art, that person's ability. And the next part is, and that man's scope. Scope means breadth of knowledge, intelligence. Shakespeare's not only a beautiful writer, but we find so many of our ideas in Shakespeare. We look to Shakespeare for ideas about psychology, about politics, about race, about gender. Shakespeare anticipated so many of the conversations that we are still grappling with. So intellectually, we have the speaker here saying, "I wish I was that person, that as smart as that person." Now, this truly, the eighth line of the poem points to the depths of the speaker's depression. Those activities that we find that give us happiness, that give us joy, that give us a sense of purpose, usually lift our spirits. But the truly depressed person, those that once gave them joy, they can't even find joy in there, enjoyment in it. With what I most enjoyed contented least. So possibly that person that of desire, that object of love, possibly the ability to write, to create. So those gave that person joy or happiness, but now even that gives them sadness. As I said before, the eighth, the third quatrain, the ninth line, it's not unusual for Shakespeare to start that with a conjunction. So we have yet here to start that line. So now we have this wonderful shift. We have quatrain number 1, quatrain number 2. We see the despair the speaker is experiencing. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, not completely despising, but almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. Yet I think about you. I think about you. Haply. Now, haply is a nice word, because there's a couple things going on with haply there, if you will. One, we can't help but think Shakespeare haply, by chance. That's a definition. But we also hear happily, if you will. But by chance I think on you. By chance I think on you. And then my state. Remember, quatrain number 1, we had outcast state. Quatrain number 3, after the shift, we have haply I think on thee, and then my state. Then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings at heaven's gate. Now that 10th line started with a haply. Shakespeare here uses, instead of iambic pentameter, he changes the beat. And so typically, if you look below the sonnet, I have this below here, and we'll scroll up a little bit. I have the iambic pentameter for you. All the stressed syllables are in bold. So When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble up heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate. There's the typical iambic pentameter, unstressed, followed by a stress. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So unstressed, followed by a stressed syllable. In line 10, Shakespeare starts with what we call a trochee. And that's a foot consisting of one long or stressed syllable followed by one short or unstressed syllable. So the first line, haply I think on thee. So that stress at the beginning there shows that the speaker of the poem has changed, has shifted his feelings or her feelings, has decided that I'm not an outcast, if you will. Also, if you think about the line, like the lark at break of day arising, nice use of alliteration, like lark. Also, we have nice use of consonants. We have that quick sounding K in like, lark, break. And, now, I like to say Shakespeare did this on purpose. We have 11 syllables in that like a lark at break of day arising. To show that I'm in such despair, I'm in such a feeling like such an outcast, that I lack so much, yet happily I think on thee and my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth sings at heaven's gates. And so we have the meter change. We have the line of poetry quickens up at this point to mirror the speaker's feelings. Haply I think on thee and my state, like a lark at break of day arising. A new day is beginning. A new song is going to be sung. This lark is singing hymns at heaven's gate. And so we have the speaker and identifying with that morning lark, that new beginning, that new day, singing hymns. Of course, the poet writes lyrics, the lyric poem. This poet writes hymns, if you will, at Heaven's Gate. And this Heaven's Gate is the person the speaker of the poem loves. And they're writing these songs, singing these songs for that person. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. And there we have the kind of the truth of the poem. I think on you, and I would not want to switch places with the king. Now the writer here says wealth of kings. Here, when we talk about diction, we want to think about how groupings of words, not just individual words, but how groupings of words are used. And so I'm going to circle fortune. I'm going to draw a line down to rich. I'm going to draw a line down from rich to wealth, if you will. Whereas wealth. All right. So we have this idea of wealth. And the speaker feels as though they have no fortune. They are not rich. They're bankrupt spiritually. They're bankrupt emotionally. They're bankrupt. So we can think about how those words point to this bankruptcy. But when they think about the person they love, they're wealthy. They would not trade all the wealth that person brings to their lives. They would not change that, change their state with the king. And there we have the word state used for the third time. My state was once outcast. My state was then changed. My state is at the end of this poem better than kings, because I have this person in my life. So it's really a wonderful love poem, in which the speaker says, I may have problems. I may feel down on myself. I may feel as though I have no friends. I have no art. I'm not good looking. I have no intelligence. But as long as I have this other person in my life, all good, all good. One other thing I want to note is that what's really wonderful about this poem, it's basically one sentence. You see the period after Kings. Yes, we have a couple semi colons there, but it's mostly a poem of subordinate clauses, working to the 10th line where we get the subject and the verb. I think I'm in an outcast state. I think that my cries are bootless. I think that other people have this. But truly, I think on thee. I think on thee. All is good. All is good. So it is as I said, a wonderful love poem by Shakespeare. I hope that you found something interesting in this brief walkthrough. Of course, I have not exhausted it. And once again, please check out Rufus Wainwright's rendition of Sonnet 29. And the next poem I walk you through will be a contemporary sonnet where the writer breaks the rules. That's it for Bards in the Basement for today. Take care.